What would you do if you discovered 50 souls trapped in eternal darkness, waiting for a savior who would never come? Captain Marcus Reid was about to find out, and his answer would change everything. The distress beacon had been pulsing for 3,000 years before Marcus picked it up, a faint whisper in the cosmic void that his salvaged ship's outdated sensors almost missed entirely. Most captains would have ignored it, written it off as another ghost signal from a long-dead civilization, but Marcus had always been cursed with curiosity and blessed with stubbornness in equal measure. He was 3 months into a solo mining expedition in the outer reaches, lonely enough that even investigating ancient mysteries seemed preferable to another night of talking to his ship's AI. The coordinates led him to a place that shouldn't exist. A massive crystalline structure floating in the darkness between stars, neither orbiting anything nor drifting with normal gravitational patterns, just hanging there like a frozen teardrop in the fabric of space. As Marcus maneuvered his ship closer, his instruments went haywire, energy readings spiking off the charts, electromagnetic fields pulsing with a rhythm that almost seemed biological, alive. The structure was beautiful in a terrifying way, its surface covered in symbols that shifted and changed when he looked directly at them, geometric patterns that hurt to comprehend. Marcus had been in space for 12 years, had seen neutron stars and black holes, had witnessed a supernova from what pilots called a respectfully suicidal distance, but nothing had ever made his hands shake quite like this. He docked his small vessel against what seemed like an entrance, though the opening appeared only when he approached, the crystals simply melting away and reforming around his airlock like liquid thought. The air inside was breathable, his suit sensors confirmed, but it tasted old, stale, like breathing in a tomb that had been sealed since before human civilization learned to write. The corridor stretched before him, walls glowing with soft bioluminescent light that cast no shadows, and Marcus could hear something, a sound like distant singing, or perhaps crying, he couldn't tell which. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to get in his ship and burn, thrust until this place was a memory. But the sound pulled at something deep in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. The corridor opened into a chamber so vast his helmet lights couldn't find the far walls. And that's when Marcus saw them, 50 crystalline pods arranged in perfect concentric circles. And inside each one was a woman, frozen in what looked like sleep or death or something between. They were humanoid, remarkably so, with faces that could have passed for human, except for the delicate, pointed ears that swept back from their heads and the faint luminescent patterns that traced across their skin like living tattoos. One was positioned at the center of the circle, her pod elevated above the others, and Marcus found himself walking toward her without conscious decision, drawn by something he didn't understand. Her hair was the color of starlight, platinum silver that flowed around her face despite being suspended in the crystal. And her features were delicate, beautiful in a way that seemed almost impossible. Like an artist's idealized sculpture given flesh. She wore a fitted tactical suit of deep midnight blue with silver accents, functional and elegant, designed for both combat and grace. Her eyes were closed, long lashes resting against flawless skin that held a soft glow, and Marcus noticed her lips were slightly parted, as if she'd been speaking when the crystal claimed her. He pressed his hand against the pod's surface, and the entire structure shuddered, those impossible symbols blazing to life. And suddenly a voice filled his head, ancient and tired and desperate. 3,000 years we have waited, it said, the words bypassing his ears and speaking directly into his consciousness. 3,000 years since the Eternal Guard imprisoned us for the crime of refusing to surrender our freedom. For choosing love over duty, compassion over conquest. Marcus jerked his hand back, but the voice continued, showing him visions that flooded his mind. A proud warrior race called the Vorin who served a galactic empire that demanded absolute obedience. 50 women who had refused orders to purge a peaceful planet, who had chosen mercy and been sentenced to eternal imprisonment as a warning to others. The prison can only be opened from outside, the voice explained. And Marcus realized it was coming from the central figure, from the silver-haired woman whose consciousness somehow remained active even in stasis. But opening it requires a price, a life for 50 lives, a willing sacrifice to balance the equation. Marcus felt his blood run cold because he understood what was being asked. What had kept these women trapped for millennia? That no one passing by had been willing to pay the cost. There must be another way, he said aloud, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, and he felt the woman's consciousness smile, sad and gentle. In 3,000 years, you are the first to ask that question, she said. Others have come, scavengers and explorers. And when they learned the price, they left without hesitation. But you, Marcus Reid, you want to find another way. Hearing his name from this ancient being should have terrified him, but instead it filled him with determination. And Marcus spent the next 6 hours examining every inch of the prison, scanning every symbol, running every analysis his limited equipment could manage. The AI in his ship offered calculations and probabilities, all of them bad. The prison was powered by something beyond his understanding, quantum locked across multiple dimensions. Designed by a civilization that had mastered technologies humanity was still theorizing about. But Marcus had not survived 12 years in the most dangerous regions of space by accepting impossible odds. And he noticed something his AI had missed. The power source was old, ancient beyond measure, and it was failing. The prison wasn't eternal anymore, it was dying. But so slowly that it would take another 1,000 years to fail completely. And the women inside would die with it, their consciousness fading as the stasis fields collapsed. What if we accelerate the decay? Marcus asked the woman in his mind. Channel all the remaining power into a single momentary collapse, every pod opening simultaneously, instead of failing one by one. He felt her consciousness sharpen, focusing on his idea, running through possibilities with an intelligence that made his own thoughts feel sluggish. It could work, she said slowly, wonder creeping into her mental voice. But the energy backlash would destroy anything in the chamber. Your ship is docked too close. You would never make it out in time. Marcus laughed, a slightly hysterical sound in the empty chamber. I've been running from death for 12 years, he said. Maybe it's time I ran towards something worth dying for instead. He felt her presence wrap around his mind like a warm embrace, fierce and protective. And something else, something that felt like hope awakening after 3,000 years of darkness. Wait, she commanded. Let me think. Let us think together. For the next hour. Their minds worked in tandem in a way Marcus had never experienced. His human creativity combining with her ancient knowledge, and together they found it. A solution that was insane and brilliant and just might work. The prison's power source was quantum entangled with the crystalline structure, but Marcus's ship had a quantum drive, primitive compared to the prison's technology, but operating on similar principles. If he could create a resonance cascade between his drive and the prison's power matrix, he could create a controlled feedback loop that would drain the prison's energy into his ship's batteries. Slowly, carefully, like defusing a bomb by redirecting the explosion. It would take 16 hours and require him to manually adjust the quantum field harmonics every 8 minutes to prevent catastrophic collapse. No sleep, no breaks, one mistake and both he and the 50 Vorin women would die. But it was a chance. The first real chance in 3,000 years. Why? The woman asked him, her mental voice soft and searching. You don't know us. We're from a different species, a different time. We have nothing to offer you except gratitude. So why would you risk everything? Marcus thought about that question while his hands worked, connecting cables from his ship to the prison's power matrix, rigging a control system from spare parts and desperate hope. My grandfather told me something before he died, Marcus said finally. He said the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching. It's what they do when no one would ever know the difference. And 50 souls have been suffering in darkness for 3,000 years. And maybe I'm not smart enough to walk away from that. He felt her crying. Then, not with tears, but with an emotion so pure and strong it flooded through their mental connection. And he understood that he was feeling what she felt. Gratitude and hope, and something that might have been the beginning of love. Or maybe just the recognition of kindness in a universe that had shown her mostly cruelty. The 16 hours that followed were the longest of Marcus's life, his hands flying across makeshift controls, adjusting quantum frequencies by fractions of a percent, watching energy readings spike and fall like a patient's vital signs during surgery. The woman stayed with him in his mind the entire time, her presence a constant warmth, encouraging him when he faltered, sharing memories to keep him alert, showing him her world as it had been 3,000 years ago. Her name was Lyria, he learned, and she had been a commander in the Vorin fleet, leading the group of women who had refused the genocide order. She showed him the moment of their defiance, standing before the eternal guard and choosing imprisonment over becoming monsters. showed him the faces of her sisters in arms who had chosen honor over survival. She showed him the peaceful civilization they had saved, a species of artists and philosophers who had done nothing wrong except exist on a planet the Empire wanted. And Marcus understood that these women were heroes, had been heroes when his own species was still learning to make fire. The energy transfer hit critical phase in the 14th hour, the entire structure shaking like it was tearing itself apart, and Marcus's hands were bleeding from where he'd burned them on overheating controls. But he didn't stop, couldn't stop, not when he could feel Lyria's hope burning like a star in his mind. In the 15th hour, his ship's batteries hit maximum capacity and started venting excess energy in brilliant cascades of lightning that arced across the chamber, and Marcus had to reroute power through his life support systems, his engines, every system that could handle the load. The temperature in the chamber dropped to freezing as his environmental controls failed, then spiked to sauna levels as energy bled through the walls. And Marcus worked through it all, his vision tunneling, hands moving on pure instinct and determination. At 15 hours and 42 minutes, something changed. The energy flow suddenly smoothed, stabilized, and Marcus watched in awe as the crystalline pods began to crack, not shattering, but opening like flowers, the crystal simply dissolving into mist that glowed and faded. 50 women drew their first breaths in 3,000 years simultaneously, gasping and crying and collapsing to their knees. And in the center of it all, Lyria opened her eyes, and they were the color of amethyst, deep purple with flecks of silver, and they found Marcus immediately across the chamber. He tried to walk toward her, but his legs gave out, 16 hours of constant work and stress finally catching up, and then she was there, moving with inhuman speed and grace, catching him before he hit the ground. Her hands were warm, he noticed, and strong, and when she looked at him there were tears streaming down her luminescent cheeks. "You crazy, beautiful, impossible human," she whispered, and her voice was even more beautiful in reality than it had been in his mind, like music and starlight. "What you've done, what you've given us. There are no words in any language to express our gratitude." The other 49 women gathered around them, a circle of ancient warriors with tears and smiles and expressions of wonder, and Marcus felt overwhelmed by their presence. Their gratitude, their sheer aliveness. They were all beautiful in different ways, with hair colors ranging from deep crimson to ocean blue, skin tones from pale alabaster to deep bronze, all with those distinctive pointed ears and luminescent patterns, all wearing variations of tactical suits in different colors, and all looking at him like he'd hung the stars. "It was nothing," Marcus managed to say, which was possibly the stupidest thing he'd ever said, and Lyria laughed, a sound like bells. "It was everything," she corrected gently. "You gave us back our lives, our freedom, our future. And now we must decide what to do with this gift." Over the next hours, as Marcus recovered and the Vorin women explored the prison that had held them, learning about the millennia that had passed, a debate began among them. Their empire was gone, had fallen 2,000 years ago. According to the data they pulled from Marcus's ship, their homeworld was ruins, everyone they'd known was dust. They were relics from a dead age with nowhere to go. Some suggested finding a quiet planet and building a new life in isolation, others wanted to explore this changed galaxy. But Lyria had a different idea. "Marcus represents something we've never encountered before," she told her sisters, though she made sure Marcus could hear through their still active mental link. "His species, humanity, is young and brash and chaotic. But he showed us something the ancient races never did: compassion without calculation, sacrifice without expectation of reward." She turned to look at him then, her amethyst eyes intense. "We spent 3,000 years in darkness paying for one act of mercy," she said. "Perhaps it's time we spent the next 3,000 years being the mercy the galaxy needs. And perhaps we could learn from the species that actually saved us when our own people condemned us." The vote was unanimous. And that's how Marcus found himself leading a small fleet back to human space. His tiny salvage ship, surrounded by a Vorin vessel that had been hidden near the prison. A sleek warship that made Earth's best military technology look like children's toys. The journey took 3 weeks, and Marcus spent most of it with Lyria, their mental connection fading as they left the prison behind, but being replaced by something more traditional. Conversations that lasted hours, debates and stories and laughter. She was brilliant and funny, and carried 3,000 years of pain with a grace that humbled him, and he found himself falling for her in a way that terrified and exhilarated him equally. "What happens when we reach Earth?" Marcus asked one night as they sat in his ship's observation deck, watching stars stream by. "Your people meet mine," Lyria said simply. 50 ancient warriors offer their services to a young species that showed us kindness. We share our knowledge, our technology, our experience. And in return, we finally find a purpose again. Something worth fighting for." She took his hand, her luminescent skin warm against his. "And maybe," she added softly, "I personally thank the man who saved us in ways that gratitude can't quite cover. Because what I feel when I look at you, Marcus Reid, is something I've never felt in 3,000 years of living." The Earth Defense Fleet nearly shot them out of the sky before Marcus could broadcast his credentials and explain the impossible situation. And even then, the authorities didn't believe him until Lyria and her sisters demonstrated their capabilities, showing technology and abilities that made Earth's top scientists weep with joy and military leaders pale with fear. The negotiations took months, committees and hearings and debates, but eventually an agreement was reached. The 50 Vorin women would serve as advisors, protectors, and teachers to humanity, sharing their knowledge in exchange for a home, a purpose, and the chance to be part of something new instead of remnants of something dead. They became legends, the 50 sisters, ancient warriors who chose Earth as their new home. And Marcus became something he'd never wanted to be: famous, the man who had freed them, who had risked everything for strangers. But through it all, Lyria stayed by his side, and their relationship deepened from gratitude to friendship to something that both species scientists found fascinating and both of them found absolutely terrifying. 1 year after he'd found the prison, Marcus stood in the garden Lyria had created on Earth, a hybrid of human and Vorin plants that shouldn't have been able to grow together but did anyway, thriving in beautiful, impossible combinations. She found him there, as she always did, moving silently until she stood beside him, her hand finding his automatically. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Saving us, dealing with all the chaos that followed, having your quiet life completely destroyed?" Marcus thought about his old life, lonely salvage runs and talking to AI, thought about what he had now, purpose and wonder, and a woman from 3,000 years in the past who somehow felt like his future. "Not for a single second," he said, and pulled her close, feeling her laugh against his chest. "Good," Lyria murmured, "because my sisters and I have been discussing how to properly thank you. And we've decided that spending the rest of your natural life making you happy is a reasonable start. Though I've called dibs on being the primary person responsible for that task." Marcus pulled back to look at her, seeing mischief and love and hope in those amethyst eyes. "The rest of my natural life?" he asked, grinning. "Well," Lyria said, matching his grin with one that showed just a hint of those slightly pointed teeth, "we do have medical technology that can extend human lifespans considerably. So you'd better prepare for a very long and very appreciated existence." Marcus Reid, because 50 grateful Vorin women are very thorough in their thanks. And I'm the most thorough of all. As the sun set over the impossible garden, Marcus kissed the alien woman who had become his entire world, and decided that curiosity and stubbornness were perhaps the best curses he could have been blessed with, because they had led him to her, to purpose, to a life beyond anything he could have imagined. And as 50 ancient warriors built a new future alongside a young species learning to reach for the stars, one human man learned that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simple decision to help someone in darkness. And sometimes thank you is just another way of saying I choose you, now and always, for as long as the stars burn.